On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
Anything you guys are excited about for this upcoming season, either being in a new role, something you read about this offseason, just the start of camp all over again? And then conversely, maybe like, obviously you guys have been around for a little bit now. Like, is there anything at the back of your mind that is just causing you an enormous amount of unwanted stress that you're just like, man, I can't wait to get through this?
No, I'm excited. This year is going to be good. I mean, I'm going back to BG for my second year in a row, so I'm pumped. We have very, very similar staff, so it's good to go back to the same kind of staff that you know how to work with, you know how to communicate with. So that's huge. And yeah, it's always exciting getting a new group of guys, and I think we're going to have a lot younger group this year, so that's going to be kind of interesting to navigate, which is good. Obviously, as a strength coach, like you want to have an impact on the guys and their routine and how they can prepare and what they're doing for their lift and just how they go about day to day. And I think high A is a really good place to do that and try and help the guys with that. So I'm really looking forward to this year. I don't really have anything that really sticks out, but yeah, I think Logan and I are gonna face each other that first week, so that should be fun.
Yeah, I would I would echo that. I think, now obviously, like you said, Chris, having done this a number of times now, I think the challenge for me, at least personally, is always okay, like how do you continue to push the needle on all things, right? Like how do you grow and develop and make an intentional effort, truly an intentional effort personally, professionally, even if you're working in the same space or the same role but in a different environment, how like what are some of the smaller things that you can do on the day to day, or relationally with others in the organization to kind of continue to grow and develop? And that's kind of the space that I'm in now, more or less, right? So I think our organization has done a good job as we've continued to grow of just adding some very smart and intelligent people externally. Um, Budgetarily, they've done a nice job of creating space to bring on and add additional roles that I kind of touched on earlier. It's just made it like our job's more impactful, right? And I think that when you're talking on purpose and kind of what drives kind of the operation, it's like you want to feel like you're making an impact and you want to feel like that you're able to do that day after day, year over year. And I think sometimes people get kind of stuck of like, all right, say someone's been an affiliate person for 3 or 4 years or 9 or 10 years or 14 or 15 years. And eventually, right, if you're not able to like handle some type of additional responsibility that challenges you, it can become stagnant. But I think that the biggest thing for me is kind of like investing into and having those conversations with some of our new folks that are here that can bring on differing perspectives and ideas on how to like add to our systems. And I think that in itself will be a unique challenge because I think that the default is basically, oh yeah, last year went pretty well and it served its purpose, so let's just run it back. And I think that there are probably elements of that, like stay true to what you believe in and what works, but then how do you reinvent yourself time and time again to really like take the next step? And I think that that's been something that I've been thinking on, and I think that that's something that I'm going to make it like try to really make an intentional effort towards is having the conversations that I haven't previously had, or seeing someone that I'm unsure of, or a new face, and I don't know, make something up, scouting in the organization. And now I'm going to make it like a good effort to go over and have like a conversation where we can blend and speak a common language of what's happening in the scouting space. How does that cross over with what's happening in the performance space? And because there are a lot of those details and things that are on their way and coming in the pipeline. So I know it's a pretty general answer, maybe not a great one, but I think it's just like really searching for ways to keep things new and to add to what you're feeling like you're already doing really well, and of course correcting any mistakes that we've made along the way. But those things kind of happen organically if you're around like-minded people that are driven and focused towards something greater.
Yeah, I love both of your answers there, and I'm kind of want to dive in a little bit more. Like, I spent 3 years in AA when I first got to Boston, and it felt like every year was different in the sense that I had different players and different teams and different ages, but it was similar in the sense that, like, once I knew a city and I knew the food that was around and the gym we were going to use and the hotel and all the bus routes and things like that, it made my life easier. So to your point, Grace, you say like you're going back to BG. My assumption is you'll probably feel more comfortable in the sense that you know all the cities, you know a lot of the strength coaches that may be returning, but you mentioned having a younger group of players, and it may feel like a totally different season, and something that you did last year that you thought was really good and helped you be successful may end up just not clicking with those players. So I'm sure that in that aspect is exciting for you. And then to your point, Logan, kind of expanding on that is like after you've been somewhere for a little bit and it's just like, okay, yeah, like every time we go to Reading, PA, I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, let's just check the box and move on. Like, how do you challenge yourself to not get stuck in that? So you just try to find ways to not feel stuck or feel bored almost, or feel like, yeah, I've been there, done that. I want to check that box. So, in specifically, are there any people or things that you're diving into education wise, or something that you're really excited to just kind of go down a certain rabbit hole for either of you that kind of keeps that passion going, or like something new you're going to bring to the players? Or is this kind of like a, hey, you never know what's going to happen in minor league baseball. Like, let's see what learning lessons I have along the way for you.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot last year as far as just programming in general, just because on the road, I haven't really experienced that. Like I've been with the Cardinals, I was at the complex, and with Cleveland, I was at the complex too. So being on at an affiliate this year was like completely different for me. Like it's completely different lifestyle, different hours, different, you're talking to different people. So it was a big learning lesson, but I think towards the end of the year we did a lot more microdosing. I think we talked about that a little bit in the last podcast, Chris, but I really like that. And I think it works really good, especially for hitters. I mean, obviously depending on where you are, like just adding it in as a prep activation and having them do it like 4 to 5 times a week, ideally. That way you're hitting everything, but it's not, you're only lifting 2 times a week and you're really sore afterwards. So I think being more confident going in with that sense, I'm looking forward to that. And then, like you said, with the younger group of guys, it is going to be, I think, a little difficult maybe to get the buy-in just because they're probably used to doing those heavy lifts. I think it's more common now for high schoolers to lift a lot more than and be similarly to like college, where as college you're under the bar all the time. We talk about that too, like axial loading. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of things obviously that go into looking forward to a season. Like I think it's okay to try and program things out. I have things programmed out and like laid out, but it's probably all going to change when I get there, right? And see the guys I'm with. And, like we said, even the testing that they're doing in spring training, it's probably going to be very, very different than what they're doing when they get tested when they drive up to Bowling Green. They get tested when they're sitting and they've been driving and traveling. I'm sure everyone has really tight hips and like they're going to have a tight back. Those numbers are probably going to be a little skewed when they first get to spring training, and then obviously when they get up to BG. But it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think that I'm for sure excited to get back into programming and we make it more individualistic for those guys. And then we are getting some more technology there. So I think that they'll get by with that. We're exposing them to it right now in spring training. So that's just going to help me program, and I think, and additionally help them hopefully with the buy-in with the performance in general. And we'll have some more interns this year to help out with that too. So it'll take some load off my plate.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. Well, I'll start with, Grace is phenomenal at what she does. I've seen it firsthand. So there's my plug for that. Good job, Grace, and good job, Tampa. But no, I think specific to your question, Chris, I've always been, I think it's probably the way that I was kind of brought up and especially introduced into S&C and baseball and coming through the system that I did. I've always leaned very heavily into some of the softer skills, the communication, the relationship building. It's a bias that I have. And I do believe that you can have all of the tactical knowledge and information in the world, and if you can't communicate it to the player in a digestible and simplistic way, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. So I think with coming from that space or that vein, I think some of the X's and O's of S and C at some point become much easier. Grace touched on, kind of challenging herself really to like be a little more like maybe confident or comfortable on that front now going into year 2 of being like at an affiliate, having to travel and be on the road, navigating what does it look like using a visiting team's weight room or a hotel gym or a public gym where there's a lot of distractions. And I think at some point, some of those things do become much easier to handle, right? And I think at that point, then it becomes okay. Well, that in that aspect, that's not really challenging anymore, right? Like I'm doing the same types of things. I'm making the similar type of recommendation. I understand if we do this type of training, it's likely to elicit this type of response, and then we're likely to see a player that shows up in this way. And ideally, the data that we're taking in supports that. To me, it's kind of like I feel like there's always room to grow on the relational piece of that. And I think that that's within your own organization. I think that's coach to player. I think it's coach to coach. So you're working like across organizations, right? When you have people coming to your facility or you're going to their facility, establishing relationships, because then ultimately the stronger those relationships are, the easier it's going to be, right, to operate on the same frequency and get your players also within your own organization what they need, whether that's gym access or whether that's additional equipment that you may need or that you didn't bring on the road or that you would like to borrow or whatever the case is. So I think that like specifically, it's definitely a heavy bias of mine, but I just think the relationships and the like investing into the people that are around you, just for whatever reason, time and time again, seem to like pay large dividends. If you're looking at from a selfish angle of, personal development, I feel like it plays in that space, but then I also feel like it helps us be more effective at our job. And that's what the organization cares about. And that's what the players care about, is us helping them perform at a higher level on the field. So I have some specific ways within that, but it's probably too long-winded to get into, but I definitely feel like that there's something that's not discussed. People don't invest dollars in continuing ed resources into that. It's all about what's the next best thing on the sports science front or on the, on the weightlifting or the, this or that. And not a lot of people go to a communications course or something where it's like, hey, how do I get all these people believing in the same thing, rowing in the same direction, to create a better outcome for the entirety of our organization has, I don't know, 300 plus employees. How do we get everybody on the same frequency like that? No one really talks about that in my experience.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I feel like, to your point, early on in my career, it was like, I got to write a good program. I got this great program. Oh shit. We got rained out and we can't go to the gym. So what do I do? And then, as you become more familiar, both of you have kind of mentioned it, like you can kind of be a little bit better at individualizing and discussing things with players because you kind of understand the general layout of how things look when you go on the road, what you have accessible to you, whatever. But I've seen this like shift into technology. I have a lot of younger coaches that are interns at my new spot, and it's like everything wants to be tech. And there's no actual like basic X's and O's, and there's definitely no communicating with people. And it's like, okay, I did their force plate tests and I got these metrics, but what do I do? And it's like, well, how do you elicit changes? And there's, again, like you mentioned, you have to have really good programming and understanding of the metrics, but you also have to deliver that to a person. And a lot of times it's like, hey, these were your metrics, this is what we're going to do. And the person's like, no, I'm not doing that. And it's like, how do you handle that when somebody tells you no? And like, those are the skills that I think kind of elevate you to the next level. But again, like you said, it gets talked about sometimes, but it's not like how to be successful doing that. It's just like communicate better. And it's like, well, what does that exactly mean? Like, and there are courses out there and there are people teaching really good things on how to like effectively do that. So I think, again, like both of you have kind of mentioned, it's like the longer you're around and the older you get and the more you're around players, especially the more you move up, I think that aspect of being able to relate and communicate and like effectively have good relationships with people, not just athletes, but with people, goes a long way. And then you can do the job well, and then you can deliver those metrics that need to be delivered, and put out a really good program that guys actually want to follow, that gets them the results they're looking for. So kudos to both of you. I think it'll be a really exciting year. And you guys being in the same league probably helps a ton, just kind of having that communication and everything. But something I forgot to ask about spring training specifically, are both of you, either of you, working big league camp, minor league camp, or both?
I'm working minor league camp, and we have like our Jan camps. We're moving to February, so it's based like an extended spring training. But I'll be in minor league camp this year.
Okay. Logan?
Kind of a split responsibility. I'm in big league camp right now. Have about a month in big league camp, and then I'll funnel down to the minor league side for the last, what probably ends up being about 3 weeks, maybe on the back end of it. So I think this plays into kind of this conversation that we've been having too. Like, I'll say that this is whatever year now of doing this, and I think that it's a super valuable thing for an organization to do. Both of my organizations that I've been a part of have done something along these lines of affording some of our minor league staff, player development staff in general, not just S&C coaches, on-field coaches and athletic trainers, and really everybody as it fits, of course, right? Like with the numbers, to have some exposure to, guys that have 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 plus years of service time in the big leagues, and how do those people go about their business? But then really, like, how do you communicate with those people as compared to how do you communicate with an A-ball kid, right? And they're totally different. And I think there's like there's a skill set that I mean, Chris, I know that at this point, having worked in probably every discipline that you can work in S&C at this point, you understand what I mean about the nuance of what goes on in these different places. And you can't speak to someone at Exos the same way that you did when you were in Boston, and certainly didn't the same way that when you worked in A-ball with the Red Sox, right? So I think that there's, like, even if you don't try, there's probably some level of development that goes on just through your experience and exposure of being, like, afforded an opportunity to work with different players. And it's been great to see some of these players come up through our system. We're an organization that relies on developing homegrown talent. So I think that it's been good for them to see some familiar faces from a staffing standpoint and big league camp. But then it's good for us too, to be able to continue and build on those relationships of those players that have come up that we drafted years ago and have come up and hit all the levels in our system. And now they're trying to make a team out of big league camp. So I think it's kind of cool, a kind of cool experience to do year over year.
Yeah, that's exactly why I asked, right? It's like, we're talking about communicating with players of different levels, and that kind of sparked it in my mind. It's like, my first year with the Red Sox, I didn't know anybody. I was going to AA. They threw me in a big league camp. And, funny enough, like, they put me on the conditioning field, and they're like, all right, get guys to do their conditioning. And you guys know how hard it is to get guys to do conditioning. And I'm out there talking, we have like veterans in 2016. And I'm like, you need to do your conditioning. And they're like, no. And they would just walk away. And I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Right. And it's like, there's one specific instance where I had to run pitcher conditioning, and all the pitchers are like, hey, go get that guy. He's going to the clubhouse. And I'm like, all right, my job is to get him to do conditioning. And I run over to him and I'm like, hey, you need to come back and do your conditioning. He's like, no, I don't. And he just walked in the clubhouse, and I turned around and all the pitchers were laughing because they knew he was going to say no to me and he was going to make me look like a fool. And I went over, I'm like, all right, thanks guys. Are you ready to run now? And they're like, yeah, we got our laugh up. And, so I talked to the head guy after, and he's like, yeah, that's just a situation you're going to have to navigate in camp. And so that's why I ask is, I know, Logan, you get some exposure, and I was just curious, Grace, if you were getting any, just because it really was valuable for me early in my career, early in my Red Sox life, early in my like higher level, just coaching of like, I had never had somebody tell me no like that. And I had never been around that level of player, and to be able to kind of navigate that situation in real time, and then also have a conversation with the head guy after to kind of go over and analyze and really like reflect on what that conversation is, what that looks like, how best to navigate it, I think just paid tremendous dividends for me moving forward on just how to be a good person and like relate well with the players. So I was just curious if you were getting any exposure to it or any opportunities. Grace, Logan, I kind of know that you've had those interactions over the years. And then the other thing is, you mentioned it briefly earlier, Logan, with the WBC coming up. How does that affect camp for you guys? If you have any players that are going to the WBC, do you have to plan differently? Or things kind of starting earlier? Are you kind of navigating with like, if this guy goes to the WBC, these other players below him may have to make up for some of that time? Like, how are you navigating that? Or do you just not have players that are going to the WBC? And if so, just kind of neglect the question, I guess.
Yeah. So I think our organization has 5 or 6, maybe, in the big leagues and in the minor leagues. Like there's a handful of, I think there's a hand. Hold on, I have the roster right here. There's I think 5 WBC guys. One of them is a minor league guy. However, he's in big league camp. So, yes, it's a definite consideration, right? Like, thankfully, all of these WBC guys on our end are representing various countries, which is I think awesome, right? There's a level of excitement and that you don't necessarily see this early in camp from those guys because they're preparing here in 2 weeks to get out of here. About give or take 2 weeks to get out of here, and definitely right. Like it is probably not great timing on the WBC. Although I'm not sure where else in the calendar year you would put it without doing something similar to what hockey is doing with the Olympics right now, but. Anyway, we manipulate kind of workloads accordingly to make sure that, those guys are prepared for the demands of basically their season beginning March 1, essentially. What it does is it expedites their calendar by basically a month because they are going to be asked to play in full-blown 9-inning games, high intensity, like something that you don't generally see early in camp, right? Like workload is something that is growing in the game, and you'll see guys go out for 2 or 3 innings and get an at bat or 2 and come out of the game, and the next guy's up, both on the major and minor league side here in camp. However, when they go off to their various training locations, they're going to be asked to play in a full blown game that mirrors the intensity of a postseason game, basically. So on the pitching side of things, making sure that the arm is built up well before what it would generally be built up for this time of year, and on the hitting front, I'm talking about running volumes and stuff like that, and making sure that we're getting guys to that level of intensity and exposure from a workload standpoint of where they're going to need to be, pretending that opening day it's March 1, essentially. I think the WBC starts maybe March 5th or something like that. So we're looking at like about 3 weeks from now. A handful of guys here in our camp are going to need to be ready to go, and TBD on when they come back, right? Like it depends on how their country does or represents themselves in the tournament. So we may get guys back in 2 weeks, and we may not get guys back until right before camp breaks, kind of depending on what that looks like. So it's a definite challenge and consideration that comes around every few years. But it's something that is kind of my first exposure to this too. Being, in camp from the get-go and kind of seeing that level of excitement and eagerness on it's not something that you generally see from some of the older veteran guys this early in camp.
Grace, how about you guys? Do you have anybody going?
Yeah, we have a handful of guys too. We have actually a few minor league guys who, same thing, expedited their pens and lives. I think they're going to be built up to have like, I think 2 innings. So both of them are going to be relievers, I think, for their team. But yeah, everything's just expedited for them, and they're getting ready to go, I think, in the next week or 2. But yeah, very, very similar program to what I was saying.
Yeah, I know the last time the WBC was going on, when I was with Boston, when I was in the big leagues, we had a guy that was going to be a starter for one of the teams, and they basically wanted him built up to 5 innings by the time the WBC started. So when he reported to camp, he was already like 3-4 innings into like live BPs, where some guys were like just stretching their wings on bullpens a little bit. So it's definitely expedited. And then the other thing with that is when they come back, you have to really be cognizant of, like you said, Logan, if a guy is there the whole time and he shows up, he's basically already played, 3 weeks to a month of high intensity baseball, and then going right to presumably the big leagues or maybe AAA. Being aware of that workload once they get there is also a consideration as well. So it's definitely a challenge. It is an amazing atmosphere. If anybody listening ever gets the opportunity to go watch a WBC game, it is just like very, very close, or if not higher than some playoff baseball, to be honest. It's just very weird that it happens right away. And like you said, Logan, I don't know if there's another time of year that you could do it. It just kind of is what it is, and you deal with the logistics of it and kind of move on and hope for the best and prepare for the worst in a lot of situations. But it really is an amazing thing that baseball does. So it's not going to ever go away, I don't think, and I don't think it should go away. And you just kind of got to deal with the curveballs that get thrown from it. One of the questions that I did ask that you guys have completely ignored me on and tried to avoid, that I am going to bring back to you again, is what is causing you a lot of stress right now, or what are you just dreading, either in spring training or going up to your affiliate? And it could be even something like trying to find housing somewhere. Like what is bothering you guys at the moment that just is part of baseball?
I think probably the travel, like obviously Logan, I think you have a little bit easier, not obviously when you go to New York or us, but Bowling Green is kind of on the outskirts of everywhere. So our shortest travel is to Rome, and it's 5 hours. And then everywhere else, we usually bus 7 hours or we fly. And like flights with 40 people is absolutely insane. If something gets
You guys
canceled, like
fly? You guys fly and able?
Yeah. Our manager is really good about that, and our owner. So we'll fly to, I think we fly to you. I'm pretty sure we fly to Salem, in Greensboro, then obviously up to like New York and the Orioles affiliate. So I think that's always just, I'm not looking forward to the travel in BG, if I'm gonna be completely honest. But other than that, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest stressor.
Yeah, for me, I think it's maybe the density of the days right now in camp. Today was our first, ironically, our first full squad workout. So we're like I mentioned earlier, we're about just over a weekend now, and it doesn't matter how many years you do this over and over and over again. I think just the sheer volume of people in the building, and we're talking from a neurological perspective, you're just fried at the end of the day. The amount of conversation and the amount of focus and attention to detail and executing things, and I need to be at this place at this time, and I need to set up this and break down that. It has like a cumulative effect, in my opinion, right? And like you can't really get enough like rest, recovery, and sleep, like those things you need to prioritize in camp. You just don't get a lot of like time to do that, to be frank. So I think I don't know that it's a stressor. I mean, physically it's obviously a stressor, but I think psychologically, just putting yourself in a mental space of like being able to handle the demands of the grind of spring training. And I know some organizations have made an adjustment on some of the scheduling and maybe trying to work in a more frequent day off, if you will, or a later arrival to the ballpark, whatever. And I think that looks different for every organization, depending on geographical situation and the weather and what time are games and what camp are you in, et cetera. But I think that spring training itself is always a form of a stressor, and some years are better than others. And we've gotten super efficient with our scheduling and with our, obviously you got to communicate well, or else it's just going to be a train wreck. But other than that, like not too much right now at the affiliate, probably just because it's still, we're still how many ever 7 weeks away or whatever, 6 weeks away. So I'm sure as we get nearer to that date, like those travel plans and flying across, what for us will be a 3-hour time differential, a few days at home. And as Grace mentioned, we go to their place to open, which is a 1 hour change of time again. So just being cognizant of traveling across time zones and what that does to your internal clock. I forgot to mention that for the WBC as well. Obviously, that's a consideration of traveling abroad and kind of like what demand does that place on your internal clock and how it is that you show up. So we monitor those types of things as well.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of this 3-part interview with Grace and Logan. I hope you enjoyed this one. There was a lot of like nitty gritty, how to navigate like specifically for baseball in this one. But even if you don't work in baseball, I think there are still valuable lessons that you can take from this part of the interview as well. 3 things that I took from Grace and Logan in this part of the interview. Finding ways to continue growing and to avoid stagnation is key as you progress further into your career. To best prepare an athlete, you need to understand the demands of their sport and work backwards from there. And prioritizing your mental, physical, and emotional health during periods of heavy coaching workload is key for longevity in this field. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.